He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Supervillains Explored, and today we are going to be taking a look at one of the most infamous, notorious, and one of the most underrated, in my opinion, enemies of Batman, which is Roman Sionis, aka the Black Mask. Roman Sionis has a huge history with the Batman in terms of his post-crisis origins. So I will get into Black Mask's origin. Black Mask, as I said before, his real name is Roman Sionis, and he was born to a very wealthy Gotham family, a very wealthy, highly stuck-up, and incredibly self-compulsive family of socialites who basically forced their son to conform to their ideas of perfection. In fact, so much so that when Roman was actually born, he was dropped on his head as a baby, and his parents paid all the doctors to cover that up. And even all the other times as a kid when he was injured or attacked, they simply didn't let anybody know about it. There was even a time as a little kid where he was attacked by a rabid raccoon. And his parents tried to cover that up because they basically didn't want people to know that their son was a klutz. They didn't want anybody to know that their son was a wimp, a disgrace. His parents, as I said before, were very, very self-obsessive. They were completely obsessed with how they looked to all the other people in society. In fact, in order to elevate their social status even further, they actually pretended to make friends with the Waynes. And they basically played a facade with both Thomas and Martha Wayne, so much so that they forced their son to make friends with Thomas and Martha Wayne's son, Bruce, establishing that Black Mask even has a personal history with Batman. When Roman Sionis actually graduated high school and he became an employee in his father's cosmetic company, Janus Cosmetics, he fell in love with an employee named Circe. And when he started dating her, his parents highly disapproved of this, and they didn't want their son to be dating any woman who they thought would be inferior to them. Finally, having enough of his parents' BS, Roman would he burn down his parents' house and murder both of them. And when that happened, he was forcibly promoted to be the CEO of Janus Cosmetics. And because of this, his irresponsibility and his lack of skills as a businessman and an entrepreneur led to his company going bankrupt. And he actually started developing a brand of cosmetics, a beauty brand, which actually had a deadly chemical toxin in them that ended up deforming women's faces really badly. This sent his company into horrible bankruptcy, but his company was actually saved when Bruce Wayne, his old childhood friend, actually bought it out. Roman was pretty upset about not only the humiliation that he had to go through and not only the humiliation he had to go through of inheriting the company that his parents, who he hated very deeply, owned, but he was also extremely humiliated by the fact that he had to have another man buy out his company in order for it to be saved. So he finally had enough of being a businessman. So what he did is that he went to the cemetery where his parents were buried at. He dug out the coffin of his father, and he carved out a large piece of ebony from the coffin, and he carved a grotesque, hideous black mask from it, and thus that's how he became Black Mask. That's his origins, pretty much. When Black Mask started out, he realized that he had a very natural ability to pull off very sophisticated crimes, and because of this, he organized a sort of mafia of low-rate criminals called the False Facers, or the False Face Society. He pretty much adopted the identity of the Black Mask, and he became a highly powerful and influential gang boss, and the False Facers soon grew into an incredibly powerful gang. However, his one policy for the False Face Society was that every single member had to wear a mask of some kind. That was sort of Black Mask's little motif, as it were, that he's very much obsessed with masks of any type, seeing as how his parents were total hypocrites, and they sort of put on their own little psychological masks to all the people outside who were completely oblivious to how dysfunctional and how truly two-faced they really were. That's another Batman villain, Two-Face. Yeah, but I'm getting off topic here. Black Mask's first major goal was to actually get revenge on Bruce Wayne for buying out his company and humiliating him. So when he started out, he began kidnapping employees of Wayne Corp. One of these employees at a later date was actually Lucius Fox, but that's for a different time. Eventually, Bruce, as Batman, manages to track down Black Mask at the ruins of the old Sionis mansion. Eventually, the mansion burns down even more, and right as Bruce is about to apprehend Black Mask, there's an accident that happens with the fire that pretty much disfigures Sionis in the way that Sionis is burned so badly with the mask on by the fire that the mask literally disfigured his face. That the engraving of the mask literally reformed his face to look like that of the mask. So the mask pretty much left a permanent imprint into Sionis' face, and because of that, he never took the mask off again. Yeah, Black Mask has a very gritty and very dark origins. I think you can see now why Black Mask hasn't showed up in a lot of cartoons and movies, is because he's a very, very dark character. But yeah, moving on. Black Mask would actually have a very strong animosity towards Catwoman, seeing as how Selena Kyle, being the thief that she is, she would constantly be stealing money from Black Mask's organization, and he really didn't approve of that. So he went to great lengths to actually find out Selena Kyle's secret identity from one of her, I believe it was one of her sisters. So when that happened, Black Mask basically set out to make Catwoman's life a living hell, because he basically captured a couple of her, I believe he captured her best friend Holly Madison, her sister, and her brother-in-law. He murdered his brother-in-law brutally, and he actually forced his sister to eat his brother-in-law's corpse, and he forced Holly to actually watch all that happen. And because of this Catwoman would really, really start to hate Black Mask. And this would result in a lot of different feuds between the two. Eventually, which would eventually lead up to Black Mask's inevitable death. But that's a little bit too early to start talking about that. One of the more famous out of Black Mask's deeds was during the Batman storyline War Games, and the fact that in the huge crime wars and conflicts within Gotham City, Batman recruited a new Robin. Seeing as Tim Drake left to become Red Robin, Batman recruited Stephanie Brown, aka the Spoiler. Batman eventually, he started to train Stephanie to become Robin, but she couldn't follow orders right, and she really didn't take a lot of Batman's missions all that seriously, and so because of that, Bruce fired Stephanie, but she wanted to prove herself a lot more. So Stephanie sort of infiltrated Bruce Wayne's undercover infiltration of Black Mask's False Face Society as Matches Malone. And whenever Stephanie met up with Batman's contact, Orpheus ended up being killed by Black Mask, and Black Mask proceeded to torture the hell out of Stephanie. So much so that at the time, it was believed that Black Mask had actually killed Stephanie. However, that was sort of retconned more recently in the comics. So Black Mask is a very, very, very mentally disturbed character, as he really loves to torture people. He's very much educated in all forms of torture, so much so that his knowledge of torture and torture devices dates all the way back to the 1300s. He's very knowledgeable in forms of different interrogations and torture techniques. So chances are, if Black Mask wants info from you, you better tell him what he wants. Black Mask is defeated by Batman at the end of the War Games story arc, but then he escapes to basically cause more mayhem and become one of the most powerful crime lords in all of Gotham. He gains a lot more power whenever he recruits Mr. Freeze as an enforcer of his, and he actually gets his hands on an Amazo android. I'm of course referring to the Under the Hood story arc, where unlike in the actual movie, Black Mask actually recruits Count Vertigo, Deathstroke, and Captain Nazi, and one of the Hyenas to actually go after Batman and Red Hood. And Black Mask is sort of humiliated by this, and so to prove himself, he threatens to go after all the people that Catwoman is close to, and then finally, Catwoman has enough, and she finally kills Black Mask. She finally kills Roman Sionis. Now, Roman Sionis does actually return as a Black Lantern, but I sort of want to, I don't really want to get into all that. Roman Sionis is dead, but there is a new Black Mask. Recently in the Battle for the Cowl storyline, the former warden of Arkham Asylum, Jeremiah Arkham, actually dons the mantle of Black Mask, and he becomes the new Black Skulled crime lord in Gotham. So yeah. That's pretty much everything there is to know about Black Mask. As far as his powers and abilities go, he's a very good marksman. He's very good with a gun. As I said before, he's very fluent in dozens of torture techniques, at least Roman Sionis was. I don't really know about Jeremiah Arkham, but all I know is that Roman Sionis is pretty much the classic Black Mask that everybody knows about, for all the people who do know who Black Mask is. And on top of being an expert torture expert and a good marksman, he's actually a pretty good hand-to-hand combatant. He's not great, but he's very much able to hold his own in a fist fight against Catwoman or Batman. So yeah, as far as being like a crime boss and a gangster, Black Mask is really a force to be reckoned with within Gotham, and that's why I think that he's undoubtedly one of the most underrated out of all of Batman's villains. And he really hasn't gotten that much exposure outside of the comics. I mean, he's appeared in a couple of cartoons, although all the times that he's appeared in cartoons were not really the most authentic representation. When Black Mask shows up in a cartoon, he's usually portrayed as being very cowardly, and I don't really like that, because the Black Mask from the comic, he has balls. He's able to stand up against Batman in a fight. He's able to take care of himself when things get hectic. And so that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that Black Mask gets a lot more exposure. Maybe we'll see him in Arkham City, and maybe the Rocksteady guys will actually do him justice. Because I think Black Mask he's a very underappreciated villain who I think just needs that break. He needs that definitive portrayal. Just like Mr. Freeze got, or just like Two-Face gets. He needs to have the definitive version of himself in some form of media. Because Black Mask is awesome. He's an awesome villain. He's one of my favorite Batman villains personally. And that ends this Supervillains Explored episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. Have a good day, and stay tuned for more.